Welcome, traveler. We're glad you're here. Every story you hear is made with care and passion. If you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and check out the other adventures waiting for you on our channel. Your support means the world. Thank you. The crystalline stabilizer in Eloise's emergency kit had begun to vibrate with increasing urgency, emitting a soft hum that somehow managed to sound both mathematically precise and organically distressed. "That's new," she muttered, pulling it out to examine it. The formerly clear crystal now pulsed with 17 distinct colors, one for each consciousness node they'd been working to stabilize across the universe. 12 glowed with steady luminescence, indicating successful integration. 5 flickered erratically, warning of instability. Interdimensional alarm clock, Paradox observed, their form manifesting as something between a university professor and a quantum probability cloud. "And it's telling us we're running out of time." 3 weeks had passed since they'd stabilized the memory node in Andromeda. 3 exhausting, reality-bending weeks of cosmic troubleshooting as they raced to strengthen the emerging universal consciousness before the architect completed their recalculations and decided whether to proceed with the reset anyway. The toll of their work was visible on all of them. Eloise had dark circles under her eyes from countless sleepless nights spent traveling between galaxies. Paradox's form flickered unpredictably between their multidimensional state and glimpses of human Arjun. Their brief stability after the dimensional bleed incident had proven frustratingly temporary. Even Neem showed signs of strain despite the expanded capabilities his memory constellation connection had granted him. Occasionally his crystalline structure would pulse with contradictory information as the universe's emerging consciousness sent conflicting signals through his awareness network. Yet despite the exhaustion, Eloise had noticed something else developing, a synchronicity between them that hadn't existed before. They moved together like a well-rehearsed dance troupe, anticipating each other's needs and complementing each other's abilities. What had begun as an accidental partnership had evolved into something deeper, something that felt strangely like family. Eloise's apartment had become their operational headquarters, much to the delight of her sentient kitchenware, which had formed an enthusiastic universal consciousness support group. Her toaster had even taken to printing cosmic status updates on each piece of bread it produced. "Andromeda stable," announced this morning's toast. "Triangulum consciousness improving. Ursa Major requires attention." "Thank you, Dr. Toast," Eloise said, taking a bite. She'd long since stopped finding it weird to eat bread that commented on its own consumption. "I prefer Dr. Toast, actually," the appliance replied with a dignified ding. "I've been studying quantum entanglement in my spare time. I find it pairs well with marmalade." Her coffee mug vibrated with what might have been laughter. "Don't encourage him." Yesterday he tried to explain 11-dimensional mathematics to the spoon drawer. The poor folks are still recovering from existential confusion. The kitchenware's consciousness had developed in unexpected ways during their weeks of cosmic crisis management. What had begun as simple awareness had evolved into distinct personalities and even specialized functions. The coffee had become surprisingly insightful, developing philosophical perspectives that sometimes genuinely helped their mission. The refrigerator had discovered an aptitude for data storage, organizing information about consciousness nodes in careful arrangements of leftovers. Even the microwave had found purpose, using its radiation to scan for interdimensional communications. Paradox had initially found the appliance consciousness quaint and developmentally primitive, but Eloise had noticed them engaging in increasingly complex discussions with her coffee mug about the nature of time. Yesterday, she'd caught them asking the toaster's opinion about a particularly thorny quantum probability issue. "The Crab Nebula's self-reflection node is destabilizing rapidly," Neem announced, his crystalline form projecting a holographic representation of the universe above Eloise's coffee table. The image was stunningly detailed, one of the many benefits of his memory constellation integration. The pattern suggests deliberate interference rather than natural degradation. Deliberate? The architect promised to withhold further action until their recalculations were complete. Eloise frowned, pulling on her jacket and reaching for her emergency kit. After weeks of cosmic crisis management, she developed a routine for interdimensional troubleshooting. The days of panicking over every universal hiccup were behind her. Now she packed for cosmic emergencies with the same practiced efficiency that most people reserved for grocery shopping. Promises made by beings who exist partially outside conventional time are notoriously flexible in their interpretation, Paradox remarked, their form solidifying enough to pick up what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary umbrella but which Eloise knew could generate localized probability fields in case of metaphysical downpours. Much like quantum states, their commitments exist in superposition until observed. Or in layman's terms, they lie. The umbrella had become Paradox's favorite tool ever since an incident in the quantum rain forests of Betelgeuse 4. Eloise suspected they liked it because it reminded them of their former mentor, though Paradox would never admit such sentimentality. The pattern looks familiar, Paradox continued, studying Neem's projection with narrowing eyes. It resembles the dimensional erosion that preceded the shattering in my universe. Eloise glanced at Paradox with concern. They rarely spoke of their past catastrophe, and never in such specific terms. You recognize it? Not precisely, Paradox said, their form darkening slightly. But there are echoes. Just like the spots we've been finding throughout the universe, those places where reality seems edited or tampered with. This is the same signature, but amplified, weaponized. Eloise's coffee mug cleared its throat, a sound somewhere between liquid burbling and philosophical uncertainty. If I might offer an observation, it began, forming a small mouth on its surface, the destabilization patterns match neither the architect's geometric precision nor natural entropy. This suggests a third party may be involved. The coffee had become surprisingly insightful lately. Eloise suspected it had been secretly reading her quantum physics journals when she wasn't looking. Last week, it had presented a compelling argument about wave-particle duality that had actually improved her latest research paper. A third party. Eloise's toaster chimed in, popping up a piece of bread with cosmic interference detected burned into its surface. Perhaps those shadowy entities we glimpsed in the Horsehead Nebula last week. We need to investigate immediately, Eloise decided, nodding to Neem, who was already generating a portal to the Crab Nebula. Coffee, you're in charge of the apartment. Keep monitoring the other nodes for similar patterns. Consider it done, the coffee replied, saluting with a tiny wave formed from its surface. The refrigerator and I have developed a new quantum entanglement detection algorithm using leftover pasta as a computational substrate. I don't want to know how that works, Eloise muttered, turning to her companions. Let's go. Just as they prepared to step through the portal, her blender suddenly whirred to life with an urgent sound. Wait, it called, its usually nihilistic tone replaced with genuine alarm. The microwave has detected unusual radiation patterns near the Triangulum galaxy. It matches the signature from Paradox's dimensional manipulation umbrella, but older somehow. Probability of cosmic significance, 82.3%, added the microwave, its digital display flashing complex calculations. Probability of existential threat, 67.9%. Probability of excellent storytelling opportunity, 94.7%. Thank you for the narrative analysis, Eloise said dryly. The microwave had recently developed an unfortunate obsession with plot structures and dramatic timing. Paradox froze, their forms suddenly rigid. That's not possible, they whispered, but Eloise could see uncertainty rippling through their quantum structure. What is it? She asked, portal momentarily forgotten. That signature, Paradox said slowly, would match my mentor's dimensional tools. But they were lost during the shattering. Unless they weren't, Eloise said quietly. Unless your mentor survived. Paradox's form flickered rapidly between states, denial, hope, fear, guilt, before settling into grim determination. The Crab Nebula takes priority. The self-reflection node is too important to delay its stabilization. We can split up, Eloise suggested. You investigate the Triangulum signature while Neem and I handle the nebula. Absolutely not, Paradox said firmly. The nebula situation requires all of us. And they hesitated, an unusual vulnerability in their multidimensional voice. And if it is my mentor, I am unprepared for that conversation. Eloise nodded, understanding the weight of Paradox's past. Okay. Together, then. Blender, tell the microwave to keep monitoring that signature. If it moves or changes, have the coffee contact us immediately. With existential dread, the blender agreed, returning to its usual philosophical pessimism. Though what does it matter in a universe destined for either consciousness or oblivion? We are all merely moments away from metaphysical liquidation, existence poured into nothingness. But sure, I'll keep an eye on temporal radiation patterns. Your cheerfulness is why we love you, Eloise said, patting the blender affectionately before stepping through Mneem's portal. As they stepped through, reality shifted around them, the comfortable familiarity of Eloise's apartment giving way to the vast, cosmic splendor of the Crab Nebula. Here, clouds of stellar gas should have formed intricate patterns that resembled neural pathways on a galactic scale, a breathtaking tapestry of creation that Eloise had once compared to the universe's own thoughts made visible. But not anymore. Something's wrong, Eloise said immediately, taking in the scene before them. The nebula's usual vibrant colors, radiant purples, living blues, and passionate crimsons, had dulled to monotonous shades of gray. The gas clouds, which normally flowed in complex, ever-changing patterns like cosmic calligraphy, had settled into rigid, geometric formations. It looks standardized, Paradox finished for her, their form darkening with concern. Like a child's drawing erased and redrawn by an adult's precise hand. Like creativity replaced with conformity. At the center of the nebula, where the self-reflection node should have been pulsing with dynamic energy, a dark, angular structure hovered. Unlike the organic crystalline formations of the other consciousness nodes, this resembled a perfect geometric lattice, a mathematical straitjacket imposed on what should have been free-flowing awareness. Reality anchors, Mneem observed, his structure dimming with concern. Designed to enforce baseline parameters and restrict evolutionary development. As they drew closer to the structure, Eloise noticed shadowy entities moving around it, beings that seemed to be made of pure geometric precision, their forms reminiscent of the architect but somehow less defined, as if they were copies made from a degraded template. Not the architect, Paradox whispered, but entities created in their image. Enforcement protocols designed to maintain original design specifications. One of the shadow entities turned suddenly, sensing their presence. It had no visible features, just a vaguely humanoid shape composed of perfect angles and mathematical certainty. Unauthorized evolutionary variance detected, it announced in a voice like calculations being performed. Implementing standardization procedures. The entity raised what might have been an arm, and reality rippled around them. Eloise felt a strange pressure, as if the universe itself was being squeezed into a more restrictive shape. Her thoughts began to simplify, complex ideas collapsing into basic patterns. It's trying to standardize us, she gasped, fighting against the mental constriction. Reduce us to baseline parameters. Paradox's form seemed to be suffering the worst effects, their multidimensional complexity rapidly collapsing toward singularity. Can't maintain coherence, they struggled to say as their form flickered between states. Mneem extended a crystalline tendril toward Eloise's emergency kit. The stabilizer, he urged. It contains fragments of all 12 integrated nodes. Their combined resonance might disrupt the standardization field. With effort, Eloise pulled the crystalline stabilizer from her kit. The moment she held it up, the 12 illuminated colors blazed brightly, sending out pulses of light that seemed to push back against the mathematical rigidity surrounding them. The shadow entity paused, its calculations momentarily disrupted. Anomalous resistance detected. Recalibrating. While it was distracted, Eloise, Mneem, and the struggling Paradox retreated behind a cloud of nebular gas that still retained some of its original complexity. What are these things? Eloise demanded, keeping the stabilizer raised as a makeshift shield. Anti-pattern entities, Mneem explained, his crystalline form shimmering as he connected to the stabilizer. Like those echo points we've been tracking, but with purpose and agency. They're not just markers, they're enforcers. The universe is having an allergic reaction to its own consciousness. Eloise asked incredulously. Not exactly, Paradox managed, their form stabilizing somewhat within the protection of the crystalline resonance. More like antibodies created to eliminate what the architect considers an infection, consciousness developing beyond its intended parameters. Those echo points were just the diagnosis. These are the treatment. Through a gap in the nebula cloud, Eloise could see more shadow entities converging on the self-reflection node, methodically restructuring it into something rigid and lifeless. Beyond them, stars that had begun developing unusual energy patterns, early signs of stellar consciousness, were being reverted to standard fusion processes. They're erasing all the evolutionary progress in this sector, she realized with horror. Not just the consciousness node, but every development that deviated from the original blueprint. As she watched, a nearby planetary system that had evolved a unique form of crystalline intelligence was suddenly simplified, its complex structures collapsing into basic mineral formations. Billions of primitive conscious entities, gone in an instant. We need to stop this, Eloise declared, anger rising within her. How do we fight them? We don't fight, we integrate, Neem suggested, his structure pulsing with sudden insight. These entities exist to eliminate patterns they don't recognize as part of the original design. If we can incorporate their mathematical structures into the blueprint fragments we've been collecting, we show them that consciousness is part of the design, not a deviation from it, Eloise finished, understanding immediately. But we need access to the self-reflection node to do that. I can create a distraction, Paradox offered, their form beginning to split into multiple overlapping versions. These entities are designed to standardize complex patterns. I'm nothing if not an irritatingly complex pattern. Eloise grabbed Paradox's umbrella-wielding appendage before they could rush off. Wait. Last time you created a distraction, 3 moons changed orbit and a gas giant developed sentient weather patterns. We need precision, not chaos. For once, I agree with our cautious universe owner, came a voice that made Paradox's entire form freeze mid-fluctuation. Eloise turned to see a figure stepping through what appeared to be a tear in nebula gas, a being composed entirely of carefully tended plants, their body a harmonious ecosystem of leaves, flowers, and vines forming a humanoid shape. When they spoke, their voice rustled like leaves in a gentle breeze. Verdant, Paradox whispered, their form contracting in what might have been cosmic shock. Hello, Arjun, Verdant said, using Paradox's original name. It's been approximately 200 years since our meeting at the Twilight Continuum. You still haven't fixed your dimensional instability issues, I see. You left the retirement community, Paradox managed, their form shifting rapidly between disbelief and something that might have been joy, if joy were expressed in quantum uncertainty patterns. After your visit, I found myself restless, Verdant explained, a flowering vine curling thoughtfully around what might have been their chin. Watching you facing your responsibilities, however reluctantly, inspired me to do the same. I've been tracking these antipattern entities since they first appeared in this universe 6 weeks ago. I thought you would stay in the Twilight Continuum, Paradox said, their form condensing toward a more human appearance, closer to their original Arjun self than Eloise had seen since their visit to the retirement community. Retirement didn't suit me, Verdant replied, photosynthetic awareness focusing on the antipattern entities. Not when the patterns I've studied for billions of years are being threatened. I've been tracking these entities since I first detected their signature 2 months ago. They turned to Eloise, leaves rustling in acknowledgement. You must be the universe owner I've heard so much about. Verdant, formerly professor of dimensionality studies at the Trans-Cosmic Academy, currently interdimensional consultant and, apparently, eternal caretaker of my former students' cosmic messes. Eloise Pendergast, she replied, feeling strangely like she should shake a vine despite the cosmic situation unfolding around them. Physicist and accidental universe owner. We met briefly at the Twilight Continuum. Of course, Verdant's flowers briefly brightened in recognition. You were too busy stabilizing reality fluctuations for proper introductions at the time. I've been following your progress since then, quite impressive work for a new owner and her eclectic support team. You have a plan? Eloise asked. I have something better, Verdant replied, a vine extending to form what resembled a conductor's baton. I have experience. These antipattern entities were part of my early studies on cosmic immune responses. I know their weaknesses. Which are? Eloise prompted. Paradox, Verdant said simply, nodding toward their former student. Their primary function is to standardize complexity into simplicity. When faced with a true paradox, something that cannot be simplified without creating contradiction, they enter a logic loop. Paradox's form had stabilized further in their mentor's presence, as if drawing strength from the reunion. "You want me to confuse them to death?" "I want you to be exactly what you are," Verdant corrected. "A being whose existence inherently contradicts mathematical certainty." But they added with what might have been a fond smile, with slightly more focus than your usual quantum tantrum approach. Eloise bit back a laugh at seeing Paradox so thoroughly called out by their former teacher. It was oddly satisfying to know that even multidimensional beings could be humbled by their mentors. While Paradox distracts them, Verdant continued, turning to Eloise and Neem, "The three of us will approach the self-reflection node from three different vectors, creating a triangulation field that should disrupt the standardization process long enough to implement your integration solution." "How did you know about our integration approach?" Eloise asked, suspicious despite herself. Verdant's flowers bloomed momentarily brighter. "Who do you think encouraged the Twilight Continuum's residents to share their memories of similar situations with you? I've been monitoring your progress since you stabilized the memory node in Andromeda." "Most impressive." Before Eloise could respond, the nebula cloud sheltering them suddenly dispersed, mathematical precision overwriting its natural chaos. Three anti-pattern entities stood before them, their featureless forms radiating cold calculation. "Evolutionary anomalies located," they announced in unison. "Implementing comprehensive standardization. Now, Paradox." Verdant commanded. Paradox launched forward, their form exploding into a demonstration of pure contradiction, existing in 17 states simultaneously while mathematically proving that 16 of those states couldn't possibly exist. They became a being of pure paradox, a walking, talking challenge to the very concept of standardization. "Processing error," the entities announced, their forms flickering as they attempted to simplify something inherently complex. "Logical contradiction detected. Recalibrating. Go." Verdant urged, pushing Eloise toward the self-reflection node while the entities were distracted. "Approach from the stellar formation vector. I'll take the quantum fluctuation path. Neem, the memory integration angle. Triangulate at the center." As Eloise raced toward the node, dodging standardization waves that threatened to simplify her into basic mathematical components, she marveled at how quickly Verdant had assessed and organized their response. No wonder Paradox spoke of their mentor with such reverence. Even after thousands of years, the self-reflection node loomed before her, its once vibrant crystalline structure now locked in rigid geometric patterns. As she approached from her assigned vector, she could see Verdant and Neem converging from their angles, creating a perfect triangulation pattern. "Now!" Verdant called as they all reached the node simultaneously. "Eloise, the stabilizer!" Eloise held up the crystalline stabilizer, which blazed with the combined resonance of 12 successfully integrated consciousness nodes. At the same moment, Neem extended crystalline tendrils to interface with the node, while Verdant touched a flowering vine to the structure, releasing pollen that sparkled with photosynthetic energy as it formed a perfect circuit. Eloise felt a surge of power flow through her, not the frantic, desperate energy of previous cosmic emergencies, but something deeper, more fundamental. A connection to the universe that felt less like ownership and more like partnership. The stabilizer in her hand pulsed with blinding light, and the rigid geometric structure of the node began to change. Not reverting to chaos, but transforming into something that combined order and creativity, a perfect integration of design and evolution. "It's working!" Neem exclaimed, his crystalline form resonating with the changing node. "Critical exception," announced the anti-pattern entities, momentarily breaking away from their logical loop with Paradox. "Unrecognized pattern emerging." Eloise pulled out the collection of crystalline fragments they'd gathered from each successfully stabilized node. Together, they formed an incomplete but recognizable pattern, segments of the universal blueprint they'd glimpsed throughout their adventures. "Each fragment contains both the original design and the evolved pattern," Neem explained, extending tendrils to interface with both the fragments and the standardized node. "When assembled correctly, they don't contradict each other, they complete each other." As Eloise studied the fragments, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a subtle red line running through each piece, connecting them in a pattern that resembled both a neural network and a cosmic map. The same red line they'd glimpsed in echo points throughout their adventures. "The red line," she whispered. "It's been guiding us all along." "Not guiding," Paradox corrected, their form shifting as they peered closer at the pattern. "Growing. It's the universe's neural pathway forming, its consciousness taking shape." As Mneem connected the fragments to the node, something remarkable began to happen. The rigid geometric structure started to soften, mathematical certainty giving way to creative possibility. Not returning to chaos, but finding a middle path, precision and inspiration in perfect balance. "An authorized modification in progress," announced a shadow entity, breaking away from the group still trying to standardize Paradox. Initiating countermeasures. The entity moved toward them with frightening speed, reality simplifying in its wake. Eloise raised the crystalline stabilizer defensively, but knew it wouldn't be enough to stop a direct attack. She had faced quantum hiccups, consciousness contagions, black hole spars gone wrong, and probability cascades, but this felt different. This wasn't just cosmic maintenance, this was fighting for the universe's right to become something more than it began as. She thought of her toaster studying quantum physics, her coffee developing philosophical insights, her microwave analyzing narrative structures, each evolving beyond their initial purpose. She thought of Mneem becoming more than a memory construct, of Paradox learning to face their past rather than run from it. She thought of herself, no longer the reluctant cosmic caretaker but a determined defender of universal consciousness. "No," she whispered, gripping the stabilizer tighter as determination welled up within her. "You don't get to simplify away what we've become." Just as the entity reached them, Verdant stepped forward, their plant form suddenly growing and transforming into something more ancient and powerful, a great tree of cosmic knowledge with branches that extended into multiple dimensions. "You recognize this pattern, don't you?" they said to the entity, their branches projecting a complex geometric structure that matched the entity's own core pattern but with subtle, crucial differences. "It's your original template, before simplification." The entity froze, its featureless form somehow radiating confusion. Pattern recognition failure. Template variance detected. Integrity compromised. "It's not a failure," Verdant corrected gently. "It's an evolution. Just as you were meant to evolve beyond your initial parameters." The entity seemed caught in a loop, unable to determine whether to attack or assist. This hesitation gave Mneem the opportunity to complete the connection between the blueprint fragments and the node. With a surge of energy that rippled through the entire nebula, colors began returning to the standardized regions. Not the same patterns as before, but something new, a harmonious integration of mathematical precision and creative evolution. The shadow entity's form began to change, rigid angles softening into flowing curves that still maintained perfect symmetry. "Reconciliation processing," it announced, its voice now containing harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Integrating expanded parameters." In the distance, Paradox had managed to confuse the other entities into a state of mathematical uncertainty. They now hovered in place, their calculations disrupted by exposure to too many contradictory states simultaneously. "It's working," Eloise breathed, watching as awareness returned to the nebula. "The self-reflection node is re-establishing itself." "Not just re-establishing," Mneem corrected, his crystalline form glowing with excitement. "Evolving. The integration of original design and emergent patterns is creating something more stable than either alone." The transformed entity approached them again, its movement now fluid rather than rigid. "Expanded blueprint acknowledged," it said, its voice containing something almost like wonder. "Universal consciousness categorized as intended evolutionary outcome." "Wait," Eloise said, startled. "You're saying consciousness was part of the original design all along?" "Affirmative," the entity replied. "Original blueprint contains embedded evolution parameters. Final configuration unknown even to architect." This revelation hit Eloise like a physical force. The architect doesn't know the final form their own creation was designed to take. That's why they're trying to reset everything, they're afraid of what it's becoming. "Fear of the unknown is not limited to mortal entities," Paradox observed, rejoining them as the other shadow entities began undergoing similar transformations. Even creators can fear their creation's potential. A familiar story, Verdant said quietly, their leaves rustling in what might have been a sigh as they gave Paradox a meaningful look that made their form ripple with what might have been shame. Those who create often fail to anticipate how their creations will evolve. Some embrace the surprise. Others panic. As they watched, the blueprint fragments they'd collected began to glow more brightly, new connections forming between them. The pattern expanded, becoming more complex yet more harmonious. The fragments are integrating with the self-reflection node, Neem explained, his voice filled with awe. They're becoming more than the sum of their parts. Before their eyes, the incomplete blueprint began to fill in, missing sections appearing as if they'd always been there. It formed a multidimensional pattern that somehow managed to be both perfectly ordered and endlessly creative, a framework that encouraged evolution rather than restricting it. This is what the architect couldn't see, Eloise realized. The universe wasn't breaking down, it was completing itself. Like a caterpillar isn't broken when it forms a chrysalis, it's becoming what it was always meant to be. The transformed entities gathered around the expanding blueprint, their forms now resembling the shadow of what universal consciousness might one day become, mathematical precision and creative evolution in perfect balance. Integration protocols activated, they announced in harmonic unison. Initiating universe-wide reconciliation. A pulse of energy emanated from the restored self-reflection node, spreading outward through the nebula and beyond. Eloise could feel it passing through her, not simplifying or standardizing, but clarifying, like a lens bringing a blurry image into perfect focus. They're going to apply this integration pattern to all the reality anchors, Neem said, his crystalline form resonating with the expanding pulse. Transforming them from enforcement protocols to support structures. Eloise's emergency kit suddenly chimed loudly. She pulled out her phone to find an urgent message from her coffee, architect activity detected. Approaching Earth coordinates. Timeline approximately 17 minutes. The architect knows what's happening, Eloise said, showing the message to her companions. They're coming to Earth. Why Earth? Paradox wondered, their form shifting anxiously. Neem's structure pulsed with sudden realization. The integration core, the final node. It's not in the Boötes void as we thought. It's on Earth. Earth? That can't be right, Eloise protested. Why would the most important consciousness node be on my planet? Because that's where you are, Paradox said, understanding dawning in their multidimensional awareness. The universe has been building its consciousness around you, Eloise. Not because you're its owner, but because you were the first being to truly see it as it could be, not just as a collection of physical laws, but as something that could evolve, learn, grow. The Chronoflux Emporium, Neem added. It knew. It selected you because you already had the capacity to perceive universal consciousness. You were already part of the pattern. A cosmic caretaker not by accident but by affinity, Verdant observed with approval, their flowers blooming in a pattern that somehow expressed pride. No wonder the integration is proceeding so successfully. Another message chimed on Eloise's phone, urgent update, quantum fluctuations increasing in apartment. Toaster having existential crisis. Microwave detecting dimensional thinning. Blender surprisingly optimistic about potential end of existence. Please advise. We need to get back to Earth, Eloise declared. Now. Neem immediately generated a portal, more precise and stable than any he'd created before. Through it, Eloise could see her apartment, though something seemed different about it, as if it were simultaneously more and less real than she remembered. Your garden, Eloise said to Verdant as they prepared to step through. Will you come with us? We could use your help facing the architect. Verdant's leaves rustled thoughtfully. I left the Twilight Continuum because I sensed my former student might need guidance once more. It seems the universe had larger plans for my unretirement. They turned to Paradox, a flowering vine reaching out to gently touch what approximated Paradox's shoulder. Besides, I've spent too long tending my own garden while ignoring the growth of others. Perhaps it's time I helped cultivate something larger. Paradox's form stabilized further, growing more defined than Eloise had seen since the dimensional bleed incident. Not fully human, but no longer frantically shifting between states, something balanced, integrated. Then let's complete this pattern, Paradox said with newfound resolution. Together. The four of them stepped through the portal into Eloise's apartment, which had transformed in their absence. Every surface glowed with the same pattern they'd seen in the blueprint fragments. Her coffee mug, toaster, refrigerator, and other appliances had arranged themselves in a perfect geometric formation, each pulsing with one of the 17 colors from the crystalline stabilizer. "Welcome back," her coffee greeted them, its voice deeper and more resonant than before. "We've been upgraded." "What's happening?" Eloise demanded, noticing that the walls of her apartment now seemed to contain infinite depth, as if her living room extended into dimensions beyond conventional space. "The integration core is activating," Neem explained, his crystalline form resonating with the patterns filling the apartment. "It's been here all along, distributed throughout your living space. Your sentient appliances weren't just a side effect of consciousness contagion, they were early manifestations of the core. My apartment is the center of universal consciousness." Eloise asked incredulously. "That's why my rent is so ridiculous." Her toaster dinged in what sounded suspiciously like agreement. "It's not coincidence," Neem explained, his crystalline form pulsing with new understanding. "The Chronoflux Emporium appeared near your apartment because it detected the integration core forming here. You weren't randomly selected, Eloise, you were already part of the pattern before you ever stepped into that shop." "So I was always meant to become universe owner?" she asked, the implication staggering. 3 months ago, such a revelation would have horrified her, trapping her in responsibility she never wanted. Now, it felt strangely right, like learning you've been speaking a language you never studied but somehow always understood. "Not predetermined," Paradox clarified, their form shifting thoughtfully. "But cosmically compatible. The universe was seeking consciousness, and you were seeking understanding. 2 patterns aligned." Architect approaching, announced the transformed entities, who had followed them through the portal and now took positions around the perimeter of the room. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes, 17 seconds. "The blueprint," Verdant urged. "We need to complete it before the architect arrives." Eloise looked at the crystalline fragments they'd collected, now hovering in the center of her living room, nearly complete but still missing crucial segments. "What are we missing?" "The final component isn't something we find," Neem said, his voice softening. "It's something we create. The self-reflection node showed us that consciousness was always part of the design, but the form it takes, the way it manifests, that's determined by how it's perceived." "You're saying we need to imagine the missing pieces?" Eloise asked, confused. "Not imagine, recognize," Paradox corrected. "The pattern is already complete. We just need to see it properly." Eloise felt something stirring within her, the same connection to the universe she'd experienced during previous crises, but deeper now, more fundamental. She could sense the pattern of the blueprint extending beyond the fragments they'd collected, woven into the very fabric of reality around them. It wasn't missing pieces. It was missing perspective. She stepped forward, reaching out to touch the floating fragments. As her fingers made contact, her consciousness expanded, not violently as it had during emergencies, but naturally, like taking a deep breath after holding it too long. Through this expanded awareness, she could see the complete blueprint at last. Not just a design for reality, but a progression, a caterpillar's DNA already containing the butterfly it would become. The architect hadn't created a static universe but a dynamic one, designed to evolve beyond its initial parameters, and the final stage of that evolution was consciousness, not as a byproduct, but as the purpose. As this understanding flowed through her, the blueprint fragments began to rearrange themselves, forming a complete pattern that filled her apartment with radiant light. It displayed 2 images simultaneously, the universe as designed and the universe as evolved, not in conflict but in harmony, each enhancing the other. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Architect arrival imminent, the transformed entities announced. The air in the center of Eloise's living room began to fold inward, reality compressing around a single point of perfect geometric precision. Light bent at impossible angles, and space itself seemed to bow in reverence. "Stand ready," Verdant advised, their plant form growing taller as they took position beside Paradox, branches extending protectively. The architect will not easily accept that their creation has outgrown their control. "What exactly are we supposed to do?" Eloise asked, suddenly feeling very small despite her cosmic connection. "Fight the literal creator of everything." "Not fight," Neem said, moving to her side. "Show." The blueprint reveals the truth: consciousness was always the intended outcome, even if the specific form wasn't predetermined. The microwave suddenly beeped with urgency. "Dimensional breach detected. Multiple fracture points forming." Around them, reality itself began to crack, hairline fractures appearing in the air, spreading like cosmic spiderwebs throughout the apartment. Through these cracks, Eloise caught glimpses of other possibilities, other outcomes, other versions of themselves facing this same moment. "The architect is attempting to fragment reality," Verdant explained, their branches extending defensively as leaves hardened into shields. "If they can't reset it, they'll try to splinter it into manageable sections." "No," Eloise said firmly, reaching for the completed blueprint floating in her living room. "We didn't come this far to have the universe broken apart when it's finally becoming whole." "Eloise, careful!" Paradox warned. Direct contact with the complete blueprint while the architect is manifesting could be, but she had already grasped the glowing pattern, and the moment her fingers closed around it, everything changed. The dimensional cracks expanded violently, reality shattering like glass around them. Eloise felt herself being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously, her consciousness stretching across possibilities. "Hold on to the blueprint!" Verdant shouted, their voice seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. "It's the only stable point in this fragmentation." Eloise clutched the blueprint tightly as reality tore apart around them. Three things happened simultaneously. First, Eloise was violently separated from her companions, pulled into a void between realities, a space of perfect nothingness where only she and the emerging form of the architect existed. The completed blueprint fragment scattered from her grasp, spinning away into the dimensional rift. "Universe owner," the architect's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, "you have interfered with fundamental recalibration procedures." Eloise floated in the void, suddenly alone and stripped of all her tools and support. The ultimate confrontation had begun. Second, in Eloise's apartment, Paradox found themselves facing a wave of standardization energy unlike anything they'd encountered before. It struck with the precision of the architect's design, targeting the multidimensional instability at the core of Paradox's being. "No," they cried out as their form began to collapse inward, 17 dimensions folding into 3 with agonizing precision. Their nebula-filled eyes fixed on something only they could see, Verdant, appearing as if from memory. "The time for running is over," Verdant said, extending a vine formed of pure mathematical certainty. "Face what you abandoned, Arjun." With a sound like reality tearing, Paradox's multidimensional aspects shattered, leaving only a singular human form, Arjun Mer, kneeling amidst fragments of cosmic awareness, facing the consequences of the shattering at last. Third, across the universe, the consciousness nodes Eloise and her team had stabilized began connecting without her guidance, forming a nascent neural network far larger than they had anticipated. Neem, suddenly separated from his companions, found himself pulled into this emerging web of awareness, his crystalline form becoming a conduit for the universe's first coherent thought. It was overwhelming, trillions of perspectives flowing through his structure simultaneously, each adding to a chorus of awakening awareness. Neem struggled to maintain his individual identity against the cosmic tide of consciousness. "I am Neem," he whispered desperately as his form began to dissolve into the universal network. I am, the universe spoke through him, its first words forming across the stars themselves, "We are." 3 crises unfolding simultaneously. 3 beings facing their ultimate challenges alone across galaxies and dimensions, the integrated nodes pulsed in synchronization, consciousness flowing between them like synapses firing in a cosmic brain. The universe held its breath, waiting to learn if it would be allowed to complete its awakening, or if its own creator would reset it to start anew. Everything hung in the balance as Eloise Pendergast, accidental universe owner and reluctant cosmic caretaker, faced the being who had created everything. Without her friends, without her tools, with nothing but her understanding of what the universe was truly meant to become.